Let me start by telling you who I am, so you'll understand why I'm writing this. My name is Haruto Takahashi. I'm a 27-year-old man, born and raised in Sendai, Japan. I've spent most of my life in this quiet city in the Tohoku region, a place where you can still hear the rustling of trees and the distant sound of the river cutting through the countryside. It's a beautiful city, though at times it can be hauntingly empty. I work the late shift at a convenience store to make ends meet. It's not glamorous work, but it's a job, and I'm used to the solitude. Now you might wonder why a man like me, who spends his days stacking shelves and serving instant noodles to customers, would have anything to say about things like ghosts or urban legends. I've always prided myself on being a man of reason. I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in the yokai or yurei, the supernatural creatures and ghosts of Japanese folklore that others seem so convinced of. I've always dismissed these things as stories, meant to scare children, or maybe to explain the unexplainable. I've heard the tales, of course, everyone has, but I never gave them much thought. That was until I encountered the Kuchisake Onna. If you're familiar with Japanese urban legends, then you might know the story of the slit-mouthed woman, or Kuchisake Onna. She's a figure from the past, a woman whose face was brutally disfigured and who roams the streets asking people if she's beautiful. If you answer yes, she'll cut you in the same horrific way. And if you answer no, she'll kill you right there on the spot. It's a terrifying tale that has been passed down through generations. As a child, I'd heard the warnings. Never walk alone at night, never talk to strangers in dark alleys, and certainly never answer the question that no one wants to hear. I didn't believe it, of course. It was just another ghost story meant to keep kids from staying out too late. But I can tell you now, after what happened to me, I wish I had listened. It was a late night, like many others. The clock had already struck 2 a.m., and I was alone at the counter, sorting through a shipment of snacks. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound, and the world outside was blanketed in a thick layer of snow. The cold had seeped through the glass doors of the store, but I didn't mind. I was used to it by now. It was one of those nights when the store was quiet, empty even, the kind of night when time itself seems to stretch out, and you can hear the smallest sounds like the ticking of the clock on the wall. That's when she walked in. I didn't notice her at first. She seemed to materialize out of the shadows, her figure barely visible through the frosted glass door. But when I looked up, there she was, standing in the doorway, looking in. She wasn't in any hurry. She just stood there for a moment, staring at me. She was wearing a long coat, and her scarf was wrapped tightly around her neck, covering most of her face. Her body was still, and the air around her seemed to grow colder the longer she stood there. The night outside was silent, almost too silent, like something was holding its breath. At first, I thought she was just another late-night customer, seeking refuge from the cold. I've seen plenty of people wandering the streets at odd hours, especially in the winter, when the city feels more desolate. But there was something off about her, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself that I was being paranoid. I had been working the late shift for years, and I'd seen all sorts of strange people come and go. But there was something about her eyes. When she finally stepped inside, her gaze was fixed on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just a person. I felt as though she was studying me, observing me, like she already knew something I didn't. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice coming out a little too sharp. She didn't answer immediately. She just stood there, her eyes never leaving mine. And then, finally, she spoke. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" The question was simple enough, but there was something unsettling about it. I could hear the words echo in my head, their meaning growing heavier with every second that passed. My mind raced. This wasn't a question that should be asked at 2 a.m. in an empty convenience store. I wanted to brush it off, to say something dismissive, but for some reason I couldn't. There was a coldness to her presence, an unnatural stillness. My body tensed, and I felt my heart beat faster, like I was being pulled into something I couldn't control. I didn't want to answer, but I did. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling, though I didn't quite understand why. "You're beautiful." It felt like a harmless response. I mean, what harm could there be in answering that question? I didn't know why I said it. I didn't even think about it. I just did it.
My name is Ravi Patel, and I live in the small town of Jaisalmer, Rajasthan. I'm an accountant, and my life had always been normal, simple, uneventful, and entirely predictable. I had heard stories about ghosts and spirits all my life, but never paid them much heed. After all, they were just tales, right? Things to scare children or perhaps keep the foolish from wandering too far at night. But what I experienced, the horror I went through, was no tale. It was real. It was something I can't explain, something I still can't forget. It all began 2 years ago, just after Diwali. I was visiting my elderly uncle, who lives in a village not far from here. He's a quiet man, and like most of us from Jaisalmer, he had a deep connection to the land, the old ways, the stories. He was the kind of person who would nod knowingly when anyone mentioned the churl, a creature from the old tales. You see, the churl is the spirit of a woman who has suffered a violent death, often in childbirth or due to betrayal. Her ghost seeks revenge, luring men with her beauty, and when they are close enough, she reveals her true form, a face that is nothing short of monstrous, with sharp teeth and a twisted grin. But it's not just her face that terrifies, it's the way she moves. Her feet are turned backward, a grotesque feature that makes her impossible to escape once you've caught sight of her. My uncle always used to tell me stories about her, warning me never to wander in the night alone. I laughed them off, dismissing them as mere superstition. But one night, as I walked back to my car after visiting him, I found myself questioning those old stories. It was a moonless night, the kind where the stars seemed to shine brighter because of the oppressive darkness that surrounded them. The air was dry and still, and the desert heat had subsided, leaving behind a chilling cold. The road from my uncle's house was quiet. Too quiet. No sounds of insects, no breeze moving the dry grass. Just the sound of my boots crunching against the gravel. I remember thinking it was odd how the road felt so empty, as though the world itself was holding its breath. I hadn't even realized I'd been walking for nearly an hour when I spotted a figure in the distance. It was a woman. She was standing by the side of the road, her back to me. Her silhouette was graceful and strange against the vast emptiness of the night. I hesitated. Something about her stood out. I had never seen anyone out here so late, especially in this isolated part of the desert. The village was miles behind me, and I was sure no one else was supposed to be on this road. "Excuse me, are you lost?" I called out. My voice felt too loud, too intrusive against the oppressive silence. She didn't respond. At first I thought she hadn't heard me, so I took a few steps closer. The closer I got, the more I felt a sinking sensation in my chest, a feeling of dread creeping over me, gnawing at my nerves. "Hello?" I said again, a little louder this time. My steps slowed as I approached her, but she still stood motionless. Her long dark hair hung in front of her face, concealing it. As I drew near, I noticed something strange. Her feet. They were backward. At first I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but then I saw it again. Her feet. Her toes were pointed in the wrong direction, twisted as if they had been broken and reassembled wrong. I felt my breath catch in my throat, a cold chill running down my spine. The churl. My mind raced as I remembered the stories my uncle had told me. How the churl lured men to their doom. How she would turn her head and reveal a face so terrifying it would send you into a frenzy. I felt my pulse quicken. I was frozen in place, my legs refusing to move. And then she turned around. The moment I saw her face, my blood ran cold. Her skin was deathly pale, as though life had drained from her entirely. Her eyes were wide and empty, black voids that seemed to pierce straight into my soul. And her mouth. Her mouth was wide, impossibly wide, with jagged, pointed teeth like those of some predatory animal. Her lips were cracked, revealing flesh that had been shredded. The grotesque smile stretched across her face, too wide, too unnatural. I wanted to run. My body screamed for me to run, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed by fear, my legs refusing to obey. All I could do was stand there, staring into the empty depths of her eyes. She took a step toward me. Her movement was unnatural, jerky, as though her joints didn't move the way they should. But it didn't matter. Every step she took sent a wave of terror through me, and I felt myself being pulled toward her, as if I were tethered to her in some way. Her voice was soft, almost soothing. It didn't match the monster standing before me. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" she asked, her voice like a whisper in the wind. I couldn't answer. My throat was dry. My mind was racing with thoughts of escape, but my feet wouldn't move. My heart hammered in my chest as I fought to regain control of my body. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" she repeated, this time louder, more insistent. I finally found my voice. "No," I managed to croak out. It was the wrong answer. Her smile widened, and I felt a wave of nausea sweep over me as she stepped closer, her feet still turned in the wrong direction. She reached out with long, skeletal fingers, her nails sharp and yellowed. I don't know what happened next, whether it was the fear or something else, but I bolted. I turned and ran, my legs finally responding, as I sprinted down the road as fast as I could. I could hear her footsteps behind me, dragging slowly but steadily, as if she were toying with me. The cold air stung my face, and my breath came in sharp gasps. I ran for what felt like hours, my lungs burning, but every time I glanced over my shoulder, I saw nothing. No sign of her, no trace that she had ever been there. But the fear was still there, crawling under my skin, like something unseen, lurking in the shadows. When I reached the village, I didn't stop running until I had made it back to my uncle's house. I banged on the door, my hands shaking, my breath erratic. My uncle opened it, his face startled by my appearance. "What happened?" he asked, seeing my pale face and trembling hands. I couldn't speak at first. I couldn't process what I had just experienced. Finally, I managed to croak. I saw her. The Shirelle. My uncle didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he stepped aside, letting me into the house. He didn't ask any more questions that night. He didn't have to. I had seen her. The churl had found me, and I don't think I'll ever be the same again.
As the final echoes of the tale fade into the darkness, remember this: in the shadows where fear takes root, the true horror lies not in the creatures that lurk, but in the darkness within ourselves. We tell these stories not just to scare or entertain, but to confront the fears that we try so hard to ignore. So as you step back into the light of the real world, carry with you the lessons of the night. The monsters we create are reflections of our deepest anxieties, and the strength to overcome them is within each of us. Sleep well, and remember, in the realm of fear, we are the true masters of our fate. Good night, and may your dreams be free of shadows. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification bell for you to see my future update on this channel. Stay safe and always remember to lock your doors.